Now, how likely are we to catch it?
Overall, in the long run, probably most people will at some point catch it.
Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox here, and for the first part of our coronavirus special, I'm here today with Rob Lambkin-Williams. When I say here today, Rob's joining us on a Skype call, but he's here in spirit nonetheless. Rob's a decorated scientist, and in 2001 he conducted the first human viral challenge clinical trial, which was the first to be conducted in Europe in the 21st century. This has become known as Flu Camp, and since then he's worked on multiple respiratory viruses, including the common colds, coronavirus, SARS, rhinovirus, RSV and flu. And essentially, therefore, Rob is one of the foremost minds in immunology in Britain today. I think, does that just about sum you up, Rob?
I describe it more as virology and as well as immunology. So virology particularly, it's the actual virus very much that I get it really interested about. Immunology, how the body responds to it, that is also fascinating.
Perfect. Well, listen, I guess for me, the best place to start here is right at the very beginning. And can you tell us what actually coronavirus is and where it came from and how we've kind of gotten to where we are today?
Coronavirus is actually a common cold. It's a virus you've caught many, many times in your life. You've caught a very simple version of it. It's something a lot of people catch every winter. It'll be a mild cold. It'll give you a sore throat, croaky voice. You might even have a mild cough. It's generally just quite a mild cold, a common cold. Every now and then, like any virus of its type, it mutates. And we first saw the biggest example of that with SARS, which was quite some time ago now. Then there was another outbreak of a very big mutation of that virus called MERS, which was Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome virus. That happened in the Middle East, as the name suggests. And now this is the third time we've seen a very big change in that virus. And all of a sudden it will do a mutation. And that mutation means that our bodies have never seen it before. So we've got no pre-existing immunity to it. So for lots and lots of people, it will be nothing more than a mild cold, an irritating cold, maybe what a lot of people might consider a bit like flu. But unfortunately, for a substantial number of people, it can actually be very dangerous and quite serious. And in particular, people.
Just holding that thought for a second, Rob. Just going back to where it's come from in terms of how has it now infiltrated its way into our society? You know, when was the first case of this new corona identified, and why has it happened?
Basically, viruses can do something which is, if you have a virus that's amongst humans, take smallpox as an example, and don't misunderstand me. I'm not comparing this to the disaster that was smallpox and that. We were able to eradicate smallpox from the planet because it only existed in human beings. Coronaviruses exist in animals and human beings. So you've got a mixture. And what happens is when human beings live close to their animals, but live animals, in slaughterhouses and in particular in Wuhan in China, where they live very close to their animals, that's where a new virus can mutate very rapidly to cross over into a human being. It's called a xenotropic virus, and so it literally means it jumps from an animal to a human being, and is able to do that. So that's what's happened here. We've seen a virus that was a coronavirus, we, as human beings, we have our own coronaviruses. Animals have their own coronaviruses. In this case, one of those is transferred to us.
Okay. And second question, obviously you've referred quite a few times in the description of this to the fact that it is effectively like the common cold, and I guess in laddie matey conversations that we all have, we talk, oh, it's just a bit of flu, it's just a bit of flu, but are we really saying then that corona is nothing more complicated or dangerous, if you like, than flu? And if the answer to that, no, it's not, or no, we're not saying that.
We're not saying it is more dangerous or it is not less dangerous in this. Generally, coronavirus is generally a mild cold thing. It is a sniffle, it's a bit of a cough, a runny nose you might catch. That a coronavirus, a human coronavirus, generally that's the sort of thing you catch over the winter months, and that's a common thing. Flu tends to be more severe in people when they catch it. They catch it less often, and that's why we have a vaccination campaign every year for flu. In this case, we've got an animal coronavirus that has transferred to a human, and because us as humans have never seen that virus, it's spreading rapidly between us. And one of the big things, though, is although for most people it will still behave like a human coronavirus, it will still basically just give you a cold, a mild cold. And many of us will probably never know we really had it until we get tested for it at some point in the future. What is different is it spreads very, very easily. And for those people who are at risk, so those people who are over their 70s, elderly people, asthmatic people, it can actually cause real complications, and that's when it becomes dangerous.
And without sounding insensitive about it towards those demographics we're talking about, are these people going to suffer just as badly from flu or from other type of coronavirus as well, insofar as we're talking about the over 70s who are going to struggle with these kind of things anyway?
Not necessarily other types of coronaviruses, that certainly people who are asthmatic, who are elderly, who are in certain at-risk groups like diabetics, people with cardiovascular disorders, all of them are part of a massive campaign to vaccinate against flu every single year. If it's a mild human coronavirus, it will be worse, but it's not going to be as serious as this. In this case, this virus is so different that they won't have built up over their lifetime any immunity to it. And so when they're asthmatic or they're elderly, that's when it becomes much more serious, because they've not had the opportunity to build up an immunity.
Now, how likely are we to catch it?
Overall, in the long run, probably most people will at some point catch it. It's a virus, it will transmit. We catch viruses all the time and barely know them. We hardly even notice it. But it doesn't mean every single person is going to end up in hospital. It means that a very few people are going to get very sick, very sick and end up in hospital. Some people might have like mild flu. Other people might have just like a normal cold. And then there will be a group of people who catch it, but don't actually even notice they've got it. But even those people who don't even notice they've got it, and those people who have got the mild version, if they transfer it to somebody who's at risk, who is elderly, who could end up in hospital, that's where the risk comes in. And it is spreading fast because it is actually a very contagious virus.
Now, what precautions can we and should we be taking?
Right. Well, I'm gonna be very, very boring and say what everybody's been saying.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Absolutely. I mean, basically, there should be. I've actually said it for a long time, but when you go to work, the first thing you should do when you go to work, go to the washroom and wash your hands. You've just been on public transport. You've just been outside. Go and wash your hands. Do the happy birthday song, 20 seconds. Wash your hands properly. Don't just rinse them underwater. Use soap. Sing Happy Birthday. I think there are a few other songs you can do. Toto by Africa, if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it.
I guess it depends how clean you want to be, right?
Yeah, quite. But Toto by Africa is actually about 20 seconds long. But wash your hands 20 seconds. Ideally, use paper towels to dry your hands and not hand sanitizers. People think they are better. They're not. Paper towels are better at drying your hands. So when you get to work, do that. When you're at work, if you've got the opportunity, wash your hands as often as you can. Always carry a hand sanitizer around with you. And just to prove the point, if you can see it, I've got one myself right here. Have that on you. Go on public transport, use that. Keep your hands as clean as possible. And actually, very, very importantly, when you get home, wash your hands again and thoroughly, because you're now taking it back to your parents and your loved ones, and quite particularly your grandparents, who might actually be at risk. So that's the big classic one. Washing your hands is the best thing you can do at the moment.
And in terms of this hand washing, because I know it's become the butt of jokes or the kind of the start of meme creations, where people are going, oh, what have people been doing before Corona? Was nobody washing their hands before? What's the serious commentary or serious answer to that? Insofar as, should we always be washing our hands with this degree of frequency, and is it just that we've slipped into forgetting about it as society?
Well, actually, we've slipped into forgetting about it as a society. I mean, you go basically in every toilet, there will be a sign up that says wash your hands by the sinks. And I would say, how many people do you actually observe who actually do that when they've gone to the toilet?
As we're on camera, I'm going to say I wash my hands after I've been to the toilet every single time.
Right. Well, you've done well. But how people also, that's very good. But also, people think just rinsing your hands underwater is good enough. You have to use soap and the water. It's 20 seconds. Wash your hands. That should be our societal norm. And if we did that, not only would it help with coronavirus, it would probably help with a lot of things, because you would have seen people walking around with masks on a lot. They're not doing anything. The only thing they might help with is they stop you touching your nose, just like you just did there. So thank you for the timing. That's perfect. But you just did that there. By putting a mask on, people get discouraged from doing that. Putting a mask on is not going to stop you getting coronavirus, because it does not spread through the air like that. It spreads because people cough into their hands, don't use tissue, and then wash their hands. Or they sneeze into their hands or cough into their hands, don't use tissue and don't wash their hands. Or if you are coughing, cough like this and cough into your elbow. Because if you do that, you're not putting it on your hands. And every time you touch, you use your hand like that. You put it on the door handle. Person who comes after you, your workmate, touches that, and you give him the virus. So I'm sure he'll be happy with it, or she.
Now, I kind of cut you off when we were talking about preventions, because we spoke about hand washing, and then I asked you about the specifics of hand washing. But what other kind of things should we be doing, or is it really as simple as keeping clean and germ free, so we have less on us to pass around?
That is the best, by far the best thing we can do. There is elements of social distancing. Some countries are doing it. I think Boris Johnson may have made an announcement today trying to discourage people to go to restaurants and that sort of thing. So keeping a social distance from each other. So certainly do not shake hands. That's a definite no-no. Really bad idea. Fist bumping is a bit better. But the elbow one is quite good. Just touching elbows as a greeting. That's good, but certainly no shaking of hands. That's a definite way of not greeting somebody anymore. You're not greeting them. You're actually being respectful to them by not shaking their hands. you're saying, I'm not going to give you this virus.
Okay. That leads us into, let's say, isolation, self-isolation, etc. I mean, how effective is it? And if other people aren't kind of isolating at the same rates, at the same time as you, ultimately, does that not negate the benefits of it?
No, it is certainly beneficial. I mean, if you have a reason to think that you have the virus, that you've been exposed to somebody who had the virus, and because we think it can take up to 14 days before you have symptoms, but within those 14 days, maybe shorter, it might be 7 days, but 14 days is generally where we think it is at the moment. Those 14 days, you can be infectious. So if you've been exposed to somebody who has definitely been infected, those 14 days can stop you being infectious and passing it on to somebody else. So it is effective.
So just to be clear then, we are self-isolating not to stop us catching it from other people, but to stop us putting it into society because we may possibly already have it.
Exactly right. You may have caught it because you have been exposed to somebody. A good example was Donald Trump the other day, who had been exposed to somebody, and they did testing him. Unfortunately, he was negative. I'm not sure I should say that.
I couldn't tell if you said unfortunately or unfortunately.
Yes, well, it was actually, unfortunately, he didn't catch it, but there we go. But that's politics and we won't go there. But so he hasn't self-isolated, but lots of other people have. And what actually is in some ways quite good, in my own street, we have a WhatsApp group, and that's expanded so that people who are self-isolating and need a bit of help, can you get me this? From the local shop or something like that, are getting in touch with people and they're helping each other out. Likewise, recommended box sets to keep people occupied and keep them back. Yeah.
But it's interesting you say that though, because like I said to you at the beginning, just off camera, what I really wanted to achieve from this podcast was to get to the facts, to get away from the hysteria, to get away from the kind of social media commentary and people passing on Chinese whispers. And for me, the thing we just said there about self-isolation is the first, what I would consider, material point that the layman is getting wrong, because I hear people all the time talk about, oh, it's getting bad, I need to start self-isolating. Effectively, you're implying I am going to self-isolate to stop me catching it from you people. But effectively, what we're saying is you're wasting your time by self-isolating if you're not a carrier, because you're not actually achieving anything, and at some point you're going to go back into society anyway.
You're just putting yourself through something you don't need to. If you think there's a chance you've been exposed, then that's when self-isolation goes, because you're protecting society from you, and that's the point. So it's not you're being selfish and I'm going to hide away and I don't want to catch anything. You're actually saying, right, I'm going to keep away from society, and so I can't pass it on to other people in society. And what is good, and I think rather positive, and a positive bit of social media as well, is that people are actually forming these groups on WhatsApp, on Facebook, in their own streets, in their own communities, where they're helping each other out. And they'll say, well, I can't go out. Would you mind picking this up for me and leaving it on the door? As long as the person sprays it down as soon as they pick it up, that's fine. But you know what I mean? It's like there's a very big benefit of social networks in this area.
So let's go from self-isolation to talk about lockdowns now then, because obviously this is something that's starting to happen in other countries, and a lot of people say it's only a matter of time before it happens in the UK. I mean, I guess I would like to ask you the question to speculate how likely lockdown is going to be in the UK, but I also really want to understand the logic behind it in terms of how long do we lock down for, what are we trying to achieve, when do we know it's safe to unlock?
Well, it may have actually almost happened because in the UK to a degree, because Boris Johnson has made an announcement, all of which happened minutes before we started this conversation. And he is now discouraging people from going to restaurants and that sort of thing. So we're in a semi-lockdown. The original plan in the UK, advised by the scientists, because we've got two very good chief medical officers and chief scientific officers, was to have a phased approach of doing this. Because if you put people in lockdown for too long, they get very frustrated and it's not healthy for their it's simply not good for their mental health. So you have to be very, very careful about when you choose to put people in lockdown and how effective.
When you say phased, are we talking about geographical phasing, or how exactly does that work?
Phased over time. It looks like it's been accelerated in the UK than was originally planned, but it would be over time. So, and an example is doing football matches behind closed doors. So you do the football match, but you don't let the crowd in because that's a big crowd. Well, where do people end up going to watch the football matches so that they can see the football matches of the teams they want to see? They go to crowded pubs, and are actually much closer together there. So it is a. What Boris's announcement, I have not seen all of the details of at the moment. It does seem we're now accelerating towards lockdown of hotels, of restaurants and that sort of thing, than was originally planned.
But is it a necessary step? Is it something that we must do? Must we go on to lockdown? Is question number one. Question number two is, if the answer is yes, why are some countries later to start it than others? And then question number three is, when would the when would a lockdown finish? Because some of my scaremonger pals are saying, oh, we could be on lockdown for 6 months.
Well, answer one, should we go to lockdown? It will probably happen, and it may be happening sooner than we expect, and which is a bit of a surprise, but it will happen to a degree. How long will it be? That's a very difficult question to actually answer because we don't know. Now, they did actually. We saw in Wuhan, they put very strict lockdowns in very, very early on. And that does seem to have slowed things down. But you would not be able to keep a lockdown running for months. That just would not work. And so that is why they should be phased. And it should be an option that is of the last resort, if you like. But it appears we might be moving now, almost as we speak, to a much tighter lockdown and probably is effective. So I forgot what question 3 was.
Well, question 3 is how long would you expect it to? How long would you expect it to go on for? Could it go on indefinitely, or if we were going to hit a lockdown this week, when would we realistically be getting unlocked?
This is a new virus. Virus we're still trying to understand. We don't know. We know its incubation period, basically. So you could potentially be just not practical. So it would end up being some form of again, it would be phased. You would not be able to lock down an entire country for 6 months, for example, because the country could not function under those circumstances.
Rob, I want to talk to you about vaccinations and cures. Are there either, and how quickly can we expect one of either?
Okay, well, trials of a vaccine started either today or yesterday. I have to explain, I was actually on a plane scheduled to go to Tenerife, to Gran Canaria yesterday, and spent 5 hours on the tarmac before they actually got us off the plane, and we ended up staying in the UK. So I was caught up in this yesterday. So whether it was yesterday or today, they actually started the tests of the first vaccine. But that's just the safety testing. You have to make sure that vaccine is safe and it's not going to hurt people more than it helps them. And so that's the first bit.
So that could be months. That could be months away.
That will be months away. It will be months to actually make sure it's safe, to actually be sure that we can give it to enough people to be it safe. Then you have to actually check whether it actually works. Because if you actually mass produce a vaccine and in millions of doses, give it to everybody, and then discover there was an issue with safety, because the safety study would only have a few thousand in it, then you've got a big problem. So you need a way of testing it to make sure it works. So there have been various people who've quoted between 12 to 18 months. My own opinion is that, and that's from experience of, I've helped develop several vaccines, and my own opinion, and time is, and it is getting quicker, but I would say we're probably about 2 to 2.5 years away on a vaccine. That would be what I would expect. As far as drugs to actually treat the virus, the antiviral drugs tend to be very, very specific. A antiviral drug for flu won't work for hepatitis B, for example. But there are some drugs that do cross over, and some of those drugs are being tested. So it is possible there is already an antiviral drug that may at least help in the most severe cases. But those are being tested, and those at best will take a year to properly be tested, I would assume.
So I guess as promising as that is for the future, the important takeaway for now is neither the vaccine nor the cure is going to be of any use to any of us right now, because it's not going to exist.
No, it doesn't exist. You phrased it perfectly. It won't be of any use to us at the moment, right now, because it doesn't exist. That's it. And it will take time to develop both. The general assumption at the moment, and this is based on, the UK is running 2 or 3 weeks later than other countries with this, and we generally think the peak will be around May.
Well, the peak of what? What do we mean by peak? The peak of contagion?
Peak amount of contagion, peak number of people who would have actually been infected, and we expect it to start going down again. A very important point, by the way, is that this could actually be the first of more than one wave, and we've seen this with other viruses. So there could be a second wave of this virus later on.
So there you have it. I hope you found that as interesting and as useful as I did. I have learned a lot more in the last 45 minutes than I've learned in the last 45 days of listening to my mates, the other so-called experts and social media. Thanks a lot for watching. If you've got any comments, if you've been affected by corona in any way, or you've got any advice for our audience, please comment below as always, and make sure you subscribe if you're not already doing so.